listening to the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show on the number one global business talk and news network on the internet, IBGR, International Business Growth Radio, the world of business at your fingertips. I'm Jason Wally Waldron, your host of the Exitology Unlock Your Profits, Unlock Your Potential show. And this season, we've been talking about creating lasting value, even in a challenging economy. And today, I'm joined by Lee Benson, the author of Your Most Important Number. And Lee, we've talked about really where you came from and where the mind methodology came from, where the idea of your most important number was born and how you've applied it thus far. And we've talked about applying these concepts to leadership and leadership development, and started to talk a little bit about, you know, the different operating methodologies, some of the issues or shortcomings that they have versus the mind methodology. And one thing that struck me that I think we ought to dive into is the difference between strategy, which is to say creating a bunch of great ideas, versus the execution of strategy, which is to say bringing those great ideas to life. Very different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the chapters in my book, Your Most Important Number, I talk about strategy. And just like I tell our clients, they come up with a great strategy. They're super excited. And I say, congratulations, you're 3% of the way there.
Oh.
Because 97% is going to be actually executing on it. And I think that's been a pretty big miss in strategic planning processes, where a big part of it has to be, how are we going to execute on this strategy?
I love, and you heard me even audibly emote around that statement because it hits so hard. Congratulations, you have a great idea. You're 3% of the way there. I've never heard anybody come at it like that. So how did you get there? How did you get to that truth that you're holding? What do you, like, tell us about that. What do you see around that?
What I believe happens is it's so enjoyable as a leader to talk about concepts and put a plan together. Like, this is so great. And look how smart we are and all the stuff we put together. It's not nearly as sexy to actually go do all of that stuff. And I think the most important work is actually executing. And, you know, I remember for a time before he passed and he became a very good friend, Jack Welch used to run General Electric. You know, he really made that point that doing something is so much more important than coming up with what you're actually going to do. I mean, just
Right.
go for it and execute on it. And he was actually my business partner for a number of years before he passed in my current company, ETW.
Oh, wow. So I mean, that's, you know, that's a pretty a pretty tall order to get Jack Welch to partner with you. You know,
Well, I met him in 2008. I went to a 2.5-day workshop where he was teaching all of his business philosophy and the approach. And on day one, he had people from each table, and I had a very small company, relatively speaking, to the folks in the room that day, state their mission and supporting values, because that was important to him. And we were the first table to go. Nobody at my table knew their stuff, and they were all representing billion-dollar-plus companies. And I said, well, here's our mission, here's why it is, and here's our values, which we changed to behaviors because values have a lot of room for interpretation.
Ah.
And there was a long, uncomfortable silence, and he said, wow, that's perfect. I wouldn't change anything. But when he went around the room, I realized why he hesitated, because everybody else had marketing slogans, nothing you could sink your teeth into. When I went to lunch on day one, I didn't get selected to sit at his table, but he sat next to me, found me, and said, I've done this thousands of times. Nobody's ever gotten it right till you. How the hell did you do it?
Oh, wow.
And I gave him my answer to that. And in 2011, he learned a lot about my aerospace company. He said, that's the best business management system I've ever seen. Had we had it at General Electric, the results would have been exponentially better.
Wow.
And I had him explain that to me because he's, you know, CEO and manager of the century. And so he went through all of it. And then he became a 10% partner, you know, he and his wife, Susie, and wow, was it just fantastic.
So that's awesome. And what I love about that is even Jack Welch, who is held up, he's a true guru, right? I mean, this guy, Yeah, just go and look at what he did with General Electric in those days. But even he recognized that there was always so much more room for improvement. And I think that's part of what you're driving at there with this 3%, because strategy can feel so good and let's go get creative. I haven't been creative in so long, and it's very important. But what do you do
Mhm.
on Monday morning and Tuesday and Wednesday? And like, what do you do to actually bring all of this forth? And my sense is that you've observed what I've observed, which is that's the hard part. And I understand you've done quite a bit around taking ideas that come from strategy, but really turning them into execution and consistency. And again, back to something we touched on, solving the problem that goal setting doesn't work. So can you maybe talk us through a case study of someone who you've worked with over the last few years where you've gone in and seen that problem, you've identified the 3% and the 97%, and just walk us through what that looks like for somebody?
Well, one of the challenges is because most companies aren't good at the senior leadership teams aren't good at actually executing on strategy. They don't come up with strategic initiatives that make a lot of sense.
Mm.
And the way I think about it in the mind methodology is a strategic initiative is something that you're going to do today that's different, that will create a better result in the future.
Okay.
That's a strategic initiative.
Okay.
A strategic initiative is not please do your job or get 20% more sales with no backup for it at all. And so it's not uncommon for us, a short case study, a large construction company on the East Coast, doing very well. And they sent us their strategy decks, and there were 107 strategic initiatives. When I put them in those two categories, which ones are something different that would create a measurable difference in the future, versus please do your job, there were only about 23 strategic initiatives out of the 107.
Wow.
And then it took a while to get the team's head around what is the ROI on actually doing this? I was like, what do you mean? Well, if we're going to do this is to get a better result. So what would you expect that result to be? And it should be different, right? And everything's on the table, even in HR. Well, we have a DEI initiative that's rolling out. Great. How will the company be measurably better by rolling it out? Completely stump them.
Wow.
And I saved them, and I said, well, maybe it's a ticket to play because you'll do business with customers that you have to have a program or they won't work with you. Right. Yes, that's it. Okay, well then it's a ticket to play.
Right.
That's fine. But usually they don't come up with strategic initiatives that really are, in my opinion, based on the definition that I gave. Mm-hmm. And they're not good at ROI thinking around what those are. So very heady conversation, love it. But wow, a lot of work still has to be done there. And then we can talk about actually executing and all the stuff.
Here's what I love about what you're bringing to the marketplace here. And I don't know if it would be obvious to everybody who's listening, and I want to call this specifically out, is that you seem to have a very, very powerful knack for looking in an 80-20 lens and getting down to the essence of, if we filter everything through these one or two very important filters, the answer is going to spit out on the other side. And is that something, did you have that in 1994, or is that something that you really had to work on to get to that point where, I'm sure now you can snap your fingers and see a lot of these things, but how'd you get there?
Yeah, well, for me, again, this is my 40-year overnight success story that I am in. And it was an evolution for me. But the wonderful thing about the mind methodology is it gets everybody there.
Cool.
I want results to be incredible for a team, even when a superstar leader isn't over that team, because I love the way you said that, Wally. They're running their decision making through these filters to decide what to do. Everybody gets smarter when you do it.
Right.
And, one of our slogans is do less better. So what is that stuff that you consistently do that creates the most value? So that it's really all in there.
And because we're going to talk about value creation here in our last segment, let's dive into that concept of do less better, because one of my favorite parts of your book, Your Most Important Number, was when you talked about you can't scale complexity, but you can scale simplicity. And So do less better. What, tell us a way that you've implemented that with somebody in the last few years.
Yeah, what are the, with any team, what are the two or three or four fundamental things that drive the most value? And how well are we doing them today? And you can just rank them simply on a scale from 1 to 10, and then describe, let's say your average of 3 or 4 on all of those 3 or 4 things. Have the team work together to describe what a 10 state would look like. This would be
Oh,
leveraging these things really well. Like, couldn't think of any better way to do it.
mm-hmm.
And if we're only a 3 or a 4 for each one of them, look at your 10 state. And then what are some actions that we could take to drive us towards leveraging them, moving towards a 10? And that's it. And that's how we work with every team. So when a team has a most important number,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got these categories of work they should be good at leveraging to improve it, what's the best work they're doing to improve how they leverage those categories or drivers to continually accelerate the value they create?
That's really cool because you're looking at it through the most important number lens on the one hand, but you're also extracting the wisdom of the team and the people who are down there executing on a day-to-day basis so that you have strategy and execution in alignment.
Yeah, and very important, once you have real strategic initiatives, how do you cascade those appropriately to every
Mm,
function, department, team in the organization that can have an
right,
impact on it? And then how do you actually see it? How do you follow up on it
right.
and and ensure that it's actually happening? So that's such an important part of the execution piece. And you and I could talk for a day about that.
Sure, sure. Well, and since we can't, I will mention that that you do discuss different time frames and map them to different sized companies in your book to give people a sense for how to go about doing that. And you really did write the book to be a manual where somebody could take it and execute against it. It's not like they read that and then have to go to the website and have to go work with you guys. Like you can take the book and run with it. And so we're gonna end this segment here real quick. Check out your most important number on your favorite bookstore, and we'll be right back with you.